Welcome, friends. Hadassah, being an orphan, grew up in her uncle Mordecai's house, and she was accustomed to depending upon him for advice and support. Becoming the bride of the king and the queen of the nation must have been far beyond anything she could ever have dreamed of. This Hadassah, now renamed Esther by the king, kept contact with her uncle Mordecai on a daily basis, constantly seeking advice and support from him and his guidance as to how to conduct herself as queen and in her relationship with the king. Mordecai would have been a great help to Esther in her relationship with the king, and after the passage of some years, Mordecai was also able to help the king in a very important matter. We find in Esther 2:21, "In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those that kept the door, that is the security people, the royal guard, were wroth and sought to lay hands on the king Ahaseurus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name." That is, Esther went to the king, and she informed the king of what was taking place, and did so in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. Then, some years after this event, King Ahaseurus promoted Haman to be his prime minister over all the other leaders in the empire. And everyone began to bow and kowtow to Haman as a man who was second in the kingdom under the king. And they flattered Haman, hoping no doubt for some personal advantage. But this Mordecai, a leading Jew who sat in the king's gate, refused to flatter Haman. It is important to understand the meaning of the term to sit in the king's gate. The king's gate was the courthouse where people went to seek judgment from the king's officials, and this Mordecai must have been a very high official and judge over the affairs of the Jews in Babylon. Mordecai's refusal to play politics and flatter Haman infuriated Haman. Haman, furious and very big in his own mind, thought it a little thing to take his vengeance upon Mordecai and determined to take revenge upon the whole Jewish people. A normal person, if moved to wrath, might consider having Mordecai beaten or imprisoned or even killed, but no, Haman thought to destroy all the Jews in the land. This, of course, was completely irrational, unless we realized that Haman was being inspired and motivated by Satan. Remember that many years before, in about 536 BC, Daniel fasted over the rebuilding of the temple and the conditions in Jerusalem, and God sent his angel to Daniel with a prophecy and a promise that in future a commandment would go forth to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. In fact, after the king married Hadassah in approximately 461 BC, he gave a decree to rebuild the city Jerusalem in 457 BC. And now Satan was using Haman to try to destroy all the Jews in Babylon. Now Haman, enraged, began to cast lots and to consult with his seers and wizards as to how best to destroy the Jews. We pick this up in Esther 3 and verse 7. "In the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahaseurus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month, unto the 12th month, that is the month Adar. and the year here was 452 BC. Now in verse 13 of Esther 3, and the letters were sent by posts unto all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take a spoil of them for a prey. This would have been in February or March of 451 BC. And on the appropriate day, according to the lots, Haman went unto the king. Esther 3 verse 8, and Haman said unto King Ahaseurus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all other people, neither keep they the king's law. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. And the king said unto Haman in verse 11, the silver is given to thee, keep your silver, the people also, to do with him as it seems good. As news of this decree spread throughout the Jews and throughout all the kingdom, there was a great mourning of the Jews, and the news of this mourning reached Esther. And Esther inquired of one of the king's officials, Hatak, and she sent him to Mordecai to find out what was happening and why the people were in mourning. Now when Hatak approached Mordecai and asked him why the mourning, Mordecai responded in Esther 4 verse 8. Also he gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, to make supplication unto the king, and to make request before him for her people. And Hatak returned and told Esther the words of Mordecai. And again Esther spake unto Hatak, and gave in commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his, to put him to death, except such as to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told this to Mordecai. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knows whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther requested of Mordecai and of all the Jews that they should fast and pray for her for 3 days. And on the 3rd day she went before the king, and he had mercy upon her, and reached out his scepter to her, and she invited him to come and visit her. Then when the king came to her, she did her best to please him, and invited him to visit her a second time, only this time to bring Haman also. Haman, thinking this a special honor, was jubilant, but the king was troubled that night and could not sleep. Esther 6:1. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, that is, the guards, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahaseurus. And the king said, What honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. Esther 6:4. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house, to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said to the king, Behold, Haman stands in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, and this because of the great honor he felt in being invited to Esther's banquet, to whom would the king delight to honor more than to myself? So Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delights to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king uses to wear, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head, and let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man with all whom the king delights to honor, and bring him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. And then Haman got the shock of his life. Esther 6:10. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then Haman knew that his future was in doubt. Esther 7:1. So the king and Haman both came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish, that if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahaseurus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. Then King Ahaseurus ordered that Haman be hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. And the king asked Esther, What more can I do for you? And she appealed to him to rescind his order to destroy all the Jews, revealing to him that she was herself a Jew. The king therefore decreed that on the day appointed for their destruction, which was the 13th of Adar, all the Jews should rise up and defend themselves and avenge themselves of their enemies. And so it came about that on the 13th and 14th of the month Adar, which answers to February or March in the common calendar of today, the Jews rose up and they destroyed their enemies. Mordecai then commanded that every year forever the Jews should observe the 14th and 15th of Adar with rejoicing over deliverance from their enemies. For more, please go to theshininglight.info and look for our article on Purim and Esther. The timeline of these events begins when King Ahaseurus, also called Artaxerxes Longimanus, assumed the throne, and in his third year put away Queen Vashti, approximately 461 BC, for her example of rebellion and disobedience. And at the end of that year he became the husband of Esther. Later, in his seventh year, 457 BC, King Ahaseurus was disposed to hold the Jews in favor due to the influence of Queen Esther, and he decreed that the city of Jerusalem should be rebuilt, sending Ezra to accomplish the task. Shortly after this, Satan uses Haman in an attempt to destroy all of the Jews. God delivers the Jews from the hands of Satan and Haman through the agency of Esther and Mordecai. Our next program will feature the rebuilding of Jerusalem under Ezra and Nehemiah and the tremendous spiritual revival which took place in Judea at that time.